Today, there's a radical change in how data is collected from space and used to impact the world. We are going to find out more as we talk to Planet.
We started as a group of engineers who were at NASA.
And we saw there was a potential to do something beyond what the market had available today.
We thought this is just a fantastic area where we could apply this philosophy into.
We want to give information and awareness to people, to government.
If you have given chance that you can do something, I think you cannot stop yourself.
Take any idea that you have to the next level.
Well, I'm here in the Planet office, downtown San Francisco, where I'm going to take you around and show you some of the exciting things that are being developed here and engineered to convert a huge spaceship into a small, tiny one that you can even hold in your hand. Let's walk with me. Well, you really transformed a huge satellite looking something like this. I'm so excited just holding this. It is actually a satellite that can map the world. It's almost unbelievable. Tell me about the journey and how did you start it?
Well, we started as a group of engineers who were at NASA, and we were trying to think about how to miniaturize satellites, make them from about the size of a bus to about this size.
Incredible.
And by making them smaller, we could launch more of them. By launching more of them, we could do a different sort of capability, in particular, this regular imaging of the whole planet to help us to take care of the planet.
So let's talk a little bit about this very nicely designed gadget.
Yeah, so we call these doves, and basically what is inside here is a telescope that is the first 2/3 of the satellite, and then the camera is at the back, so looking through the telescope down at the Earth. And then all in the back third around the optical path is all the electronics, the radios, the computers, all the sensors for attitude, determination, and control. And then on the front is the radio systems, and of course exposed is the telescope. So what's happening when they're taking pictures is that they go along like this, taking one shot, snap, 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 as they go along the Earth's surface. And what's also significant about this is that we have these solar arrays that come out. But in addition, we have an artist in residence who puts artwork on the side of our satellites to show that we take pride in our work. You know, we want to make them beautiful.
It's beautifully designed. This one, I believe you have a story about this dove.
Yes, this one is particularly interesting. So this is one of the ones that was on a launch that failed. So the vehicle went up about 100 or 200 meters and then it exploded. And we found this guy lying on the beach. So he survived the whole rocket exploding, huge fireball, but it landed on the beach and started turning on and started trying to take pictures and phone home and say, hey, I'm here. And it didn't realize it wasn't in space. So
oh my God.
We had to go and get it and save it. But now it's just for the museum, if you like.
Well, how many such explosions have you had?
So we've had 15 rocket launches with our satellites on board, and 2 of them have exploded. One Antares rocket and one SpaceX rocket.
Now, how did you think that you can accomplish this? What made you believe in it?
It's mainly because I'm crazy. No, no. I mean, we actually were looking at consumer electronics like smartphones and laptops and gadgets like that, and going, well, these have a tremendous amount of capability in it. Why is it that satellites need to be the size of a bus? Maybe we can make them the size of a bread box, sort of like you're carrying there. And we redesigned satellites around all of the technology, the latest technology of sensors and processors and hard drives and radios and GPS chips and things like this, and put them all into a small package. And we sent them into space to see if they work, and they worked, and now we're putting up a lot of those.
Now, you make it all look very simple and easy, that you can produce something like that can watch the world, but there should be a lot of barrier to entry to even watching the Earth from outside, right?
There are a lot of barriers to entry, it's true. It's difficult because Firstly, these satellites are very complicated. There's lots of different devices in there. If you take these apart, it's extremely complicated, electronics and sensors and so forth. So there's a lot of design complications. Then, of course, you have to get launchers to put them up into space, and that turns out to be quite an ordeal too. But we, from our NASA days, had contacts with the various launch providers. You have to get regulatory approvals from the government to operate the satellites, and you have to have ground stations all around the world to bring the imagery down, and then we have to have all the processing of that imagery on the ground on cloud compute servers. So there's a lot of different components. There's at least those 5 that are hard to do, but each one we tackled and were able to accomplish it.
But at the core of it all, what is the problem that you're trying to solve with this?
Okay, the reason we did this was that by imaging every point on the Earth's surface every single day, we could track things like deforestation. We could help people improve agricultural yields, the farmers to improve their yield, because we can tell crop yield on a pixel by pixel basis. So we can tell how well is the wheat doing, how well is the rice doing, or what have you. We can help with disaster response. So there's a bunch of humanitarian things that we could help with. So if there's floods, fires, earthquakes, and so forth, we can help relief operations by quickly figuring out what happened and helping the people to determine where they need to go to save which lives or what have you. So there's a bunch of humanitarian applications, and then there's a bunch of commercial applications as well. So the satellite maps that you find online, of course, those companies want those maps to be up to date, so we can help them to do that. There's agricultural companies that want our data to help to decide which seeds to sell to which farmers. There's the finance people in New York and London and Tokyo that are betting on markets, and we can, of course, sell the crop yield for the whole world every day, or the output from all the world's copper mines, or the ships into and out of all the world's ports. And they're very interested in that so that they can bet on those markets and go, this is the commodity that's going to win. So there's a bunch of commercial applications of the data too. And that's why we started as a company, Planet Labs.
Will, you mentioned that you used one of the rockets that India launched recently and you piggybacked on them. Tell me about that.
Well, it was great to have the opportunity to launch on an Indian rocket, and we in fact have another one coming up in just a few months with more satellites going on another Indian rocket.
Well, fantastic. I think India can really use some of this to, for their development,
Absolutely.
which is overdue.
Absolutely.
Now, has this journey changed you as a person at all? Because this must have been the most fantastic journey for you. It took a lot out of you, I'm sure.
Yeah. I'm sure this experience has changed me. Certainly, there are some basic things that I've learned, for example, about how to run a business and how much energy it takes to establish a new market and so forth, and that sort of thing. There's a lot of learning.
Were there any surprises?
Well, there's many surprises, but I think, as I said, the most interesting thing I've learned was about how much the Earth is changing. In a way, that was the biggest surprise.
We are going to watch the live launch of 2 doves from the International Space Station right here from San Francisco. Don't go anywhere. We just saw the launch of 2 doves from here, right here in San Francisco. Sid is going to tell us about this office space. It looks very unique and different. It's so exciting.
Absolutely, love to tell you about it. So we are currently at Mothership. This is the place where we hang out, have our food, have parties, and you get to witness the launches of satellites from Mothership. This is also a central hubs where people have their meetings, talk about work, and hang out.
Now, how different is this from the place that you already worked, which is Microsoft?
Yeah, so this planet is buzzing with activity, being a startup, very casual, informal culture here. As you see, people hang out here, and it's always happening place.
Now, this space looks like people hang out here almost whole day and whole night because it's equipped with almost everything. You can literally stay here, sleep here, do whatever else you want to do. Tell me the idea behind all these things that we see around.
Let's start with a couple of things here.
Yeah, like this.
These are freshly minted Dove satellites which have just been manufactured from our factory right next door. This is where we build the satellites, and we got to witness the birth of 3 new DOVE satellites to be sent on future missions.
So from the time it is manufactured to the time it's actually launched, what is that process and how long does it take?
Well, once the satellites are manufactured, they are shipped to the various launch stations for loading into the rockets. From there on, it depends on the launch manifest when the rockets go up and they get deployed. Sometimes the rockets directly deploy the satellites into the space. At other times, as you saw today, they send them to an international space station. Who up there pushes them out of the window.
Now, what part of this ecosystem are you involved in, from the manufacturing to the launching?
So I've been fortunate to be involved almost through the entire spectrum of things I've worked here. Initially, I started working, helping the manufacturing teams, the design and hardware of the satellite, and then moved on to image processing, data pipeline, cloud computing, big data stuff. Currently, I'm managing the work in the areas of processing of the images, delivery of the satellite imagery products, and the infrastructure which hosts these image products.
Let's go and take a look at some of the other spaces out here. Everything looks very young, nice, vibrant.
Absolutely.
Let's find out what else is around here.
So we are standing at the hub of our office space. This is our core working space, basically. This is the different areas where all the teams are sitting in. We have manufacturing teams sitting in. So you have different hardware teams sitting in, which includes mechanical teams, electrical teams. This way we have optics and ADCS control teams sitting. And then on that far side, we have mission controls and mission center. Missions are the guys who control the satellites into the orbit. These guys are the ones who have built this fully automated system which can control all the satellites without human intervention.
What is the most critical element in this office? What is the most critical work and the job in this office?
I would say almost all the jobs are equally important and very critical to it. Different teams work together in this space and bring it all together. Our ground station teams up there, they take control of the satellites through their cloud software, starts talking to the satellites. Then they commission the satellites and stabilize it to a point where it starts taking pictures of the Earth. There are other teams which are responsible for getting those pictures downloaded, processing those images, and then start creating products out of that. There are other teams which build graphical user interface and software which can allow us to see anywhere, anything on the Earth, anytime, with some of the latest, greatest images.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah, we're excited to talk about it.
Karthik, you're the Senior VP of Engineering, and a lot of it took to cram this huge, gigantic spacecraft to a small one.
Yeah.
Tell me, how did you do it?
Yeah, so it's been a journey for engineers. When we started this, we know that the reason why we want to do this is we are used to looking at huge, humongous satellites. Bill Marshall talks about this a lot of TED shows too, that it takes hundreds of millions of dollars to develop one satellite, and it takes like many years to go around. And the planet's mission is driven towards imaging the entire Earth every day and make the global changes actionable, accessible to people. So we can't do that having that kind of a lead time in creating such a huge satellites and development time and launch time and all those. So our mission was to create something really compact and bringing the state-of-the-art existing technologies and consumer electronics parts to bring those new breakthrough technologies into satellite, building such a compact and then doing many of them as fast as we can so that we can actually iterate faster on the technologies. We call them agile aerospace. So our core mission is to do that. So from the get-go, we know that we want to do compact, highly performance-oriented, but it's low mass, so we can create more of those satellites, and we can go every day to image the entire Earth.
And what is the life of this?
So the life, it's an interesting question because the life of the satellite really depends on altitude. So it's roughly about 3 years.
And what happens to it after that?
So it re-enters, and it basically the parts are decays. And we are very particular about understanding the space debris, and our team is pretty involved in terms of making sure that we comply to all the regulatory in requirements on that when we re-enter.
Now, let me ask you this personal question. When you really saw this world from up in the orbit, what went through your mind? What was the reaction like? Did you expect it to be the way you saw, or there was some surprises, something that humbled you or changed you personally?
Yeah, I mean, if you really take from the space, it's one beautiful planet. And if you take one static shot of it, it's beautiful. But there are changes every minute, every day. So if we can be part of that, understanding the change, and if you can influence the changes and bring that intelligence to the community, that's very humbling. And being part of that is very humbling.
Avanti, you're managing the ground stations. That must be exciting. How do you choose these ground stations geographically?
So a lot of it has to do with the latitude. So our satellites are in 2 orbits right now, the International Space Station orbit and the Sun synchronous orbit. For us, the Sun synchronous orbit is a highly polar orbit, and so we look at high latitude sites that also have really good infrastructure for us. So we need internet, we need power, things like that, and we need land. So there needs to be space, and it needs to be pretty clear view of the horizon as well.
And then how does it look like? Explain to me a ground station, and how different is it from the other ground stations of the other satellites?
So they're all pretty similar. If there's 2 different types, we have a high-speed ground station, which is pretty much a large dish antenna. So if you saw one, you would pretty much recognize it. And then we have a low-speed antenna, which kind of looks like what you would have as on your roof as a TV antenna. So the high-speed antennas, the dishes, they downlink all of our imagery from all the satellites, and then they also communicate software upgrades and things like that to our satellites. And the smaller low-speed antennas give us data on where the location of the satellites are, so GPS and ranging data, health data on the satellites, and we use those basically to calibrate.
Now, these are huge amount of data. Are you collecting them on site? Are you storing them somewhere else? Where are you keeping them?
So the satellites are transmitting a lot of data, you're right. And then they're basically coming down to the ground station and getting sent back up into the AWS cloud. And that's where we do a lot of processing, and then they go through our image pipeline, and it's all automated. And then it goes into our API, which we then give to our customers.
Now, what kind of security do you have to comply with when you're in ground?
So there's a lot of security that we do consider. We are in compliance with all of the government regulations and the local regulations of the government of which country we're in as well. Besides that, we have a lot of security encryption that we use internally just to protect our network and our data. So that way we use firewalls, we use a lot of different things to make sure that our data and our network is protected, and that way we're not threatened by any attacks or anything like that.
Now, what do you do with this data currently?
So currently, we are collecting all this data because it is the only data set that exists that is collecting imagery of every place on the Earth every day. We are making this data available via our API, and we're just really excited to see what use cases they have for it. Up until now, there hasn't been a data set like this where it's as comprehensive and as frequent. So we don't really know the full extent to the use cases, but there is a lot of use for in agriculture monitoring, environmental monitoring, deforestation, urban growth, things like that.
And what do you intend doing with all that?
I mean, for us, it's really about making a really transparent Earth. We want to be able to see the changes that are happening on a day-to-day basis, and because of that, because so much is happening every day, we can empower people to make changes and make good decisions about what they're doing. So, I mean, if I don't know that there's a drought, for example, if I can't see an image of a lake that's receding every day, I may not make a conscious decision to save water. But when I do see imagery, that's just like a huge human's impact on the environment. That makes a pretty big difference to me, I think.
Now, when you have all these different stations in different parts of the world, are you watching for a particular area, or do you do the recording all over?
So we're actually using all satellites at all ground stations. And the reason that we have so many ground stations all over the world is because we have such a large constellation of satellites. In general, there's only a couple up there with many different ground stations. But for us, we're going to have, at peak, we'll have 100 to 150 satellites. And it's beneficial for us to have these stations spread out over the world, so that way the satellites aren't competing for resources. And because we have such a high volume of data, we want to be able to make sure that we are downloading them in a timely fashion, because we want to be able to get that data out there quickly. So for us, it's really about maximizing the time that we're in communication with satellites. And obviously, like I mentioned before, we pick regions of the world that are optimized for our orbit.
You came here from a very different background. What got you attracted to space?
I would have never expected to end up here if you asked me 5 years ago, but when I came and I interviewed at Planet and I learned about Planet, I was just really excited by the passion that the founders had and everyone who was working here, and the mission. I mean, the mission is to do good, and that's something that I really, really value, and I think that this imagery that we're providing can have the potential to make a really, really big difference. And so for
change
me,
the world.
Change the world, yeah. And for me, that was always something that was really important, to be able to be proud about the work that I was doing. And space is super exciting. It's the more I learn about it, the more fascinated I am by it, and it's just such an exciting place to be right now.
Like the unknown becomes known today.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Planet is redefining the way we collect data from outer space so that we can change the world for a better living.